These receptors here, these nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, are cholinergic. Why? Because they bind acetylcholine. So once again, the word cholinergic does not need to cause any type of confusion whatsoever. It couldn't be more simple and straightforward. It's associated with acetylcholine. If a neuron releases acetylcholine, makes it, it's cholinergic neuron, end of story. If a receptor binds acetylcholine, and there are two kinds, I've given you one of them, a nicotinic, there's another kind of acetylcholine receptor called muscarinic, we're going to see it today, it's cholinergic. It's really that straightforward and simple. Okay? So, and by the way, this motor neuron and that one and that one and that one, are those myelinated too? Yeah, it's all the same. I just didn't want to draw it all. It just takes too much time. I don't want to draw all this. I don't want to draw it 5 times. But what we see here, it's all the same down here. These are skeletal muscle cells. These are myelinated. They're releasing acetylcholine. We have our nicotinic receptors. It's all the same from top to bottom. Nothing is different. All right? That's where we ended up. And that's why I went through it so quickly, because we've already done this. And now we're going to end for right now the somatic discussion by talking about neuropathies. And we already started. And you guys know what a neuropathy is. When you see the word neuropathy, we're talking about dysfunction, damage of the nerve. Okay? We can have 2 types of neuropathies. They can either be sensory or they can be motor. So to make sure that we understand completely what we're saying here, we'll draw our big picture again. So I'm just going to put central nervous system. We understand what that is. I'm going to put over here a nerve, sensory nerve. What that's going to represent, we can put our receptors here to be complete, thorough, and there's our motor nerve. Now obviously they're doing 2 completely different things. Sensory nerves are taking information to the central nervous system. Motor nerves are controlling the effectors in this particular case, skeletal muscle cells. Okay? Now, when it comes to a neuropathy, and again, that's what we're talking about here. When you see that word, once again, dysfunction, damage to nerves. And when you damage a nerve, things are not going to work properly. So the action potentials that are normally marching their way along all the axons of that nerve, and these action potentials as well that are going to the effector to control it, they're either not going to be present because of the damage, or they're not going to conduct properly. They might be slowed, they might be choppy. Something is going to go wrong with conduction here. That's our problem. That's how we're communicating. So if we damage those axons that are carrying the action potentials aren't going to be carried properly. Either they don't exist, or they're slower, or something is wrong with them. And because of that, the central nervous system will interpret the information in a weird way, and the muscles are not going to be controlled properly. So when it comes to these neuropathies, we'll start with the sensory neuropathy. So again, we're damaging that nerve. All right? So that would be a sensory neuropathy. That's how we're going to depict it. Damage. Now, what damages these nerves, by the way? All kinds of things. So you guys have talked about discs in your spinal column, right? You guys know what the discs are. If they slip, if they bulge from where they're supposed to be, what's sitting right there? Nerves. You'll start to pinch the nerves. You'll start to squeeze the nerves. The nerves made up of a bunch of different axons. And so now what's going to happen is that these action potentials that, again, normally march and conduct in a normal way, no longer conduct in a normal way. What else can do it? Car accident. You can have crush injuries in a car accident. You can have autoimmune conditions. Your immune system goes and it just starts to eat the nerves. Why does that happen? We don't know. All right? So there's all carpal tunnel syndrome. You guys have heard of carpal tunnel syndrome? That's a neuropathy. So anything that's causing damage to a nerve is a neuropathy. And if we're damaging the sensory axons of the nerve, we're going to have a sensory neuropathy. So what kind of symptoms are we going to have? Well, that's going to be based upon exactly what axons are being damaged that are coming from specific receptors. So what are these receptors detecting? What's the stimulus of these receptors in the somatic nervous system? Pain, right? Pressure, heat, cold, those types of things. Isn't that what the steroreceptors are detecting? So that's normal stimulus to those particular receptors, which will then be interpreted by the central nervous system as pressure, touch, pain, this, cold, heat, whatever. Now those receptors are still going to receive the stimulus. And they will then what? Cause polarization, will reach threshold, will generate action potentials. Under normal conditions, everything is good. But now that's not going to happen. Even though the stimulus is working fine, and the receptors are working fine, now that these action potentials are no longer conducting properly, now the brain will interpret those action potentials as something weird. And so what kind of symptoms will you have? Like a pins and needle type of feeling would be a symptom. You can have a burning sensation, not because you have your hand or your arm or your leg on fire. It's not on fire, there is no heat, but you feel as though there is. Why? Because those particular nerves that are responsible for taking that information from the brain are not doing it properly anymore. And so the brain interprets those action potentials in a weird way, and so you have that feeling. It might be numbness. You might not feel anything. Why? Because now no action potentials are getting to the central nervous system, and they have nothing to interpret. So then you feel numbness. And I talked about symptoms and signs. Did I talk about symptoms and signs the last time we were here? The difference between a symptom and a sign? A symptom is something that a patient feels. So when you have a symptom, it's something that you feel. A sign is something that can be measured. So when it comes to sensory neuropathies, it's strictly symptoms that are going to be felt by the patient. They have to tell you what they feel. Okay? Are we good with that? So, sensory neuropathy, what kind of symptoms? Pins, needles, burning, numbness. Those are just a few. It could be pain. It could be a whole bunch of things. All right? And I give you an example of how it feels. What I'm going to tell you right now is not a neuropathy, not a true neuropathy, but it'll mimic the symptoms of neuropathy. Everybody's probably fallen asleep on their arm or their leg in the middle of the night, I'm going to assume, probably. You wake up in the middle of the night and you can't feel your arm. Completely numb. Why is your arm numb in the middle of the night? Could be a couple of reasons. Number one, you could have laid on it and crushed the nerves, and now we can get the action potentials to the brain. And now you feel nothing. The other thing that can be happening is that as you lay on that arm, you cut blood flow off. You need blood to tissues of the body for the tissues to survive and to thrive. Yes, so we cut blood supply off to the nerves. Now they don't have the nutrients that they need to work properly, no action potentials. So those are the two main reasons. Those are the two reasons. Then after a little while, after you've woken up and you find that your arm is asleep, and you do one of these, you do all you can to start moving your arm, or you might just let it lay there, and then eventually what do you start to feel? Pins and needles, right? Why all of a sudden are you feeling something? Why all of a sudden do you have the pins and needles? Because now the blood is starting to make its way to the axons again. They're starting to now fire action potentials. Now the central nervous system is getting some type of information, and so now you have that feeling. Is it normal feeling? Is somebody sticking you with pins in the middle of the night? No, but you feel that because the action potentials that are being generated at that particular point in time cause those neurons to think that's what's happening. These neurons here in the central nervous system, they don't care why those action potentials are there, how they got there. If they're there, they're going to get interpreted. Then eventually what? You can feel your arm again. Why? Because the crush is gone, and the blood flow is normal, and the tissue's working properly, and all is good. So again, that's not a neuropathy. But people walk around and have that feeling all of the time. Numbness all of the time. Burning sensation all of the time. Why? Because they damaged their nerves. Type 2 diabetics, not just type 2, type 1 diabetics in general. You ever hear of diabetic neuropathies? If you watch TV, you'll see medications out there for them. A diabetic neuropathy is a neuropathy caused by diabetes if it's not treated. Really high levels of glucose in your blood cause inflammation to your blood vessels. And those blood vessels get inflamed. Now they're going to be damaged. Now they can't deliver blood to the tissue. Now the tissue starts to die. Okay? So again, it can happen for a whole slew of different reasons. Crush, pinched nerves, diabetes, autoimmune conditions, all kinds of things. But regardless, when you damage the nerve, by definition it is a neuropathy, and the symptoms will tell you where the neuropathy lies. So you guys had to learn the spinal nerves, right? And what they and where they're going and where they're going to, or where they're going from. Why? But someday if a patient comes up to you and says, like, you know what, my pinky is numb. Immediately, what nerve would you think? The ulnar nerve, right? You wouldn't be looking at their lumbosacral region. Okay, you'd be looking up here maybe for a pinched nerve, maybe in the upper thoracic region, which is where that comes from. Or maybe the nerve damage is someplace maybe at the elbow. Maybe they're just leaning their arm on their desk all day and they pinch that ulnar nerve. Whatever. Hit your funny bone. Everybody's probably done that. You hit your elbow and then your arm, your hand goes numb. The funny bone, that's not what's getting damaged. What's getting damaged, not really damaged, but crushed, is your ulnar nerve. That's why you have that sensation. Okay? Are we good? So you have to know, again, what kind of symptoms you're going to see with the sensory neuropathy. Now, what about a motor neuropathy? Completely different story, because we have completely different nerves, and they're controlling, in this particular case, skeletal muscle. So when we talk about the appropriate output of these effectors, we're talking about muscles contracting. We're talking about these nerves controlling the skeletal muscles. So if you damage these nerves, what's going to happen? Muscle weakness, that's something that you can feel, that can be a symptom, but you can also measure muscle weakness. And you're going to see something else, you're going to see muscle atrophy. Do you know what atrophy is? Anybody know what atrophy is? Something gets small. Okay, all kinds of things in the body can become atrophied. There's something I haven't been telling you, and I'm not going to tell you, but I'll just share it with you really quick. These synapses here, when it comes to, let's go here, these synapses, acetylcholine, at this synapse, there's more than just neurotransmitter being released here. There's other stuff going on. And so if we start to damage these neurons here, again, motor neuropathy, there are things that are going here on at the synapse that are feeding the muscle. And if you don't feed these muscles, that's a very simplified way of looking at it, but a good way to visualize it. If you screw around with these neurons here, which is going to screw around with the synapses here, you're not going to be able to feed the muscles properly, and they will start to shrink and get small. So a neuropathy will also cause your muscles to get small, okay, and become weak. And there's some other things that happen with reflexes that we'll talk about when we get to muscle, okay? Are we good? Yes? All right. Now, I said one is sensory, one is motor. They can happen at the same time, by the way. Because what kind of nerves are many nerves in your body? Start with an M. Mixed, right? A mixed nerve. So if that was a nerve is a bundle of what again? A bunch of axons, correct? So, how about these are some axons going in that direction, and these are some axons going in the opposite direction, carrying information in the opposite direction. And I'm going to say that the blue ones are the sensory axons, and the red ones are the motor axons. That's a mixed nerve. I think you guys already know this, do you not? A mixed nerve has both sensory and motor function. Okay? And many of the nerves in your body are both. So if you have some type of trauma to a nerve, if you crush this nerve, chances are you're going to damage those and you're going to damage those. So you'll have both a sensory and a motor neuropathy.